Oh, good. I just want to make sure it looked all still for a moment.
Okay, good.
Yeah, good. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Outliers Unlimited. I'm very grateful to have you with us today. I understand it's a little late, but we're having a very special Outliers event today, and it's because this past April has been Autism Awareness Month. And for those of you who are unfamiliar or not aware, Autism Awareness Month is when people take the time to provide further education or better awareness, obviously, on the subject of autism spectrum disorder and perhaps other affiliated, would you say developmental disabilities? But would you say autism is a developmental disability?
Yeah, it is a developmental disability, but
I thought so. Just sometimes I've heard some people it's an intellectual disability, developmental. I just want to make sure I get that accurate.
we'll say it's a developmental disability first.
Okay.
And then some individuals with autism may also have an intellectual disability.
Well, thank you, Dr. Terry Swanson, who
Hello.
I'm very happy to have with us today. She is here as our special guest to help us better understand the form of autism and why it's important to better understand it. Some of the many issues we face in the world today, not a majority, not the only, but a majority of them kind of coexist with the lack of understanding and the lack of being aware of the existence of disabilities such as autism in the first place. And that's why we're here, and very happy to have you with us
Well,
today.
thanks for asking me to come.
Oh, please, it's my pleasure. Now, I was hoping I could ask, I mean, for our first-time viewers, what exactly is autism?
So, like I said before, autism is a developmental disability. It's also related to different neurology. And so, all of us have
Neurology, that is the study of the brain?
Mm-hmm.
Thought for the people who don't understand
Yes,
that
thank
big
you.
words are not scientific like the Big Bang Theory.
So, it's something that you're born with. And
Genetic.
so some people or some children, it might be more obvious from the beginning that the child has autism. For some kids, and I'd say probably for the majority, it's more obvious around 3 years of age when a child is
Really?
starting
3 years?
to, when kids are beginning to talk more. And so if kids have a delay in language, that makes it a little bit more obvious. And then for individuals who they would be considered higher functioning, where they have met their developmental milestones as a young child, so they walked on time, they talked on time, and probably have advanced language for their age. They often don't get caught or identified as having autism or Asperger's syndrome until much later.
In other words, it's not exactly easy to physically spot.
Right. So for kids who have delays, so they didn't talk on time and walk on time, the doctors can catch that easier because it's obvious. Because the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention have developmental milestones from birth through 5 years of age that shows what should the average 2-month-old be able to do? What does the average 6-month-old be able to do? And so
sort of a biology expectation list.
Yes. And so for kids who are delayed, they're easier to catch because we can check off. Oh, you know what? They're not cooing or they're not looking at me when I talk to them. Where other kids who did meet their developmental milestones, and maybe they appear advanced because they have good language, they like to talk about their interests. I think I'll say young kids that,
assuming they know what they are.
That's true. But I'll say some common interests that I see with younger kids, trains, dinosaurs, anime. I mean, they could talk about those topics for hours and hours and hours because it's fascinating.
It's their world.
And
it's
they're
their engagement.
Yes, they're enthusiastic about it. And because they are able to have conversations and talk about the things they're interested in, they're harder to identify that, yes, they do have autism. And typically for those kids, when they get into school, so kindergarten or a little bit later, when now they're part of a group and there's more social pressures put on you, you know, when you're in the classroom, that's when those kids that would be considered higher functioning, because they have good language abilities, that's when they're usually identified.
Makes sense. And if I may ask, this is out of total curiosity, you say they're better identified in the school setting. Would it by any chance have to do with the pressure level or intimidation? You know, like expectations of the homework and the tests?
It could be, but you also...
Maybe not the key factor, but could that play in?
It could.
Like triggering stress, you know, some people, for example, myself, I'm not saying this applies to all, but a majority, at least a few I've met, they react to stimuli, stimulus?
Either could be right.
Oh, okay, well, to stimulus, we'll say. They react to stimulation, you know, pressure, stress, some higher, some lower, and well, with ADHD or Asperger's syndrome, like I have, it can be a little, well, they can handle it, you know, better at younger ages, and then when they're older, I'm just saying that can be tricky.
Yes.
I'm asking.
Well, and if you look at the classroom environment, so let's say a typical second grade classroom.
Second grade classroom,
is going to have 20 to 30 kids in it.
Oh my.
And so think about, you know, you have your teacher.
I haven't even seen that big a college classroom. It's been a while since I've imagined 30 people in a room that's smaller than a gymnasium.
But if, you know, for the young child, going from their home environment where there's just a few familiar people, you've got mom, dad,
probably a sibling.
Siblings, other
some
spouses.
Extended, not to mention possible extended families.
Extended family, yeah. So you have people you're familiar with. You're in an environment.
And then there's everything else in the world.
Yes. And then you go to a school environment where there's lots of people. And all that social stimulation, even though you're at school to learn academics, of course. But
more like our parents take us and we have no idea what's going on.
Right.
But yes, I mean, we're learning equations and facts and things.
But there's a lot of social demand. So you have to use your social skills and communication skills to be successful in that academic environment.
I never gave it much thought, but you make a very compelling point.
It makes it challenging. And if
it does.
You know, if you're used to being in an environment with just a couple kids and siblings, they know how to work with each other, navigate.
They know the routine. They know the pattern.
Yeah.
But
and when you
go
don't
to school, know theirs, and they don't know yours.
Right. So that makes it more challenging. And then having that many people, you know, for example, I work from my office by myself most of the time. And when I go out to a social event, like a conference, that requires a very high level of communication and social skills and paying attention. And so when I leave, even though I don't have autism, but when I'm done, I'm exhausted. Where when I'm used to my typical environment working by myself, there's no social demand put on me. And it takes a lot of energy.
Well, I can understand that. I do.
Yeah. And so that's why for those kids who would be considered having higher functioning autism, because they met their developmental milestones, walked on time, talked on time, have advanced language often.
Well, sometimes that comes through environment.
Yeah.
I didn't exactly learn to get a more colorful vocabulary till I was in high school.
Well,
they taught us all them prefixes and suffixes one day. Next thing I know, I'm talking like I'm Kelsey Grammer playing Frasier.
Okay. But I know, like, you were diagnosed later.
I was. Yes, I was diagnosed later
Yeah.
than most youth. In my adolescent years, I was just 1 month shy of turning 14 years old, and that's when it became clear that I don't know exactly when my parents, but I know it was around that time, and that's when it became clear to me that I had Asperger's syndrome. And not until then, I only knew about my ADHD, which I was about, I'm going to say maybe close to 8 years old, so like that.
So, and that's not uncommon for people who would have been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome or higher functioning autism at that time period. 'Cause that's,
It isn't?
let's see, that's, was it 10 or so years ago?
Yeah, well,
About.
well, a little close to it, yeah. I'm close to 20, actually, yeah.
So, it's not uncommon for kids with autism that have advanced language to be diagnosed with ADHD first or other
Is that
developmental.
right?
Yeah.
I was not aware of that.
And I think at that time people were not as aware of what is autism, what does it look like, because I think.
Well, to be fair, autism had just started in the 80s, and let's face it, the first person, there was only one person really speaking about it, Temple Grandin, who was the first person to experience autism and to speak about the experience publicly and provide the facts, not based on information she didn't have. Like, she was a real game changer, Temple Grandin. And, April is a time to, well, we should recognize it yearly, of course, but even more so, we take the time to recognize people like her and other people with disabilities who have come far and made so many accomplishments in spite of their barriers, like Walt Disney with his dyslexia, and again Temple and her autism. And remind me exactly. Maybe you can tell our viewers a little of some of her accomplishments.
Sure. Well, let's see. Temple Grandin, I'm trying to think.
She had a photographic memory. I remember that.
But I'll say she was born during a time period where families were encouraged by their doctors that if they had a child with a disability, this is when she was young, like under the age of 5, her mother was told that you should institutionalize your daughter. At that time, it was thought that parents didn't have the knowledge and skills to effectively raise a child with disabilities.
I can't believe it. I can't believe it.
It was thought that only the, I'm going to say, quote unquote, specialist could raise these children. But that is absolutely not the case. And so thankfully her mother did not listen. Her mother's Eustacia Cutler, and she speaks frequently, national conferences, international conferences, about that time period.
Oh yes, all over. I actually happened to come across, I had the pleasure of not only seeing her speak, but I actually happened to meet her once in the middle of one of the conferences. This is actually a funny story. She had spoke, and then they had another person, and I had to use the restroom real quick. And when I'm coming out, just to head back to the meeting, I find myself walking right behind Ms. Grandin. And I had the pleasure to tell her how inspired I was, and she asked if I was a professor or something. I told her that I was visiting her for school or something. I said, no, I was a student. I came to see her, and I had just heard about her the past summer. And to meet someone who's accomplished so much, it was an honor.
She has, and
true inspiration for
I would
me.
say Dr. Grandin is the most famous person in the world with autism.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And she really was probably the first person with autism to really speak out about what autism was to her, what she could do, what her parents did for her mother did for her, and her family did for her. And she really advocates for using the person's strengths and things that they're interested in to help them learn and make progress and develop their skills. And today, Dr. Grandin is a professor at
sounds very sufficient.
Yes.
Very formidable.
So she's a professor at a university in Colorado, and she designs.
Is that right?
animal confinements.
The cow things. I
Yes.
remember when she was working at that, what was it, a meat packing plant, or she was working at that meat farm?
Yes, and she was able to, in her mind, she can look at the environment and figure out, what is stressing out the animal.
Is that what it was? I remember she had a photographic memory, if I recall.
Yes, and so now, I don't remember exactly what her degree is in, but essentially she designs cattle handling facilities, and in her mind, when she designs, the drawings, she can, close her eyes and see every single nut, bolt, board, and she can walk through it in her mind. I mean, she's absolutely brilliant.
She has to be. I mean, I myself have a photographic memory, but I gotta admit, you know how people say I could do this with my eyes closed? I gotta be honest. I've never tried doing a drawing with my eyes closed, and I can't guarantee I could do it. I once had a vision for an idea for a drawing closing my eyes, but I don't think it got any further than that.
But I mean, she is absolutely brilliant, and when she goes around the world to
brilliant is definitely the word, or too modest a word for her.
But when she goes and she speaks with groups, and actually she came here to Pittsburgh, I can't remember how many years ago, but it was a while ago.
Really? Right here in Pittsburgh, Kansas?
Actually, we brought her in. A local family donated money so that the faculty would have an opportunity to learn from her. And so she spoke.
Sounds memorable.
In the fall, every year in August, right before school starts, we have a faculty professional development day, and so she came and spoke to all the faculty, and then she also spoke to the local Cattlemen's Association, as well as we had an event downtown.
I wasn't aware there was such an association. I don't mean to interrupt it, just I didn't know there was such an association.
There is apparently. I didn't know either. And then she also spoke downtown at Memorial Hall. We had an open event to anybody in the community could come and hear her.
I'm sorry, you said Memorial Hall?
Memorial Hall. It's on
Memorial Hall. Where is that?
It's downtown.
Wait a minute, Memorial Hall. Is that by any chance down on Broadway?
It's near Broadway.
The only thing I can think of is that cemetery on your way to Lotus Express.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't. It's just off. It's just off. It's just off Broadway. But
I'm sure I'd know if I see it. But back to the point.
Yeah, but we had that event so that way the community could come and hear from her. So it was absolutely wonderful that she could talk to the faculty. So we are
and reach out just beyond the school, but also to the whole community.
Yeah, and so
it's only quite an event.
It was wonderful that we could have her and come talk to the faculty.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, it was wonderful. But here was somebody when she was young, growing up. I mean, she struggled in school, learning, finding the right type of learning environment, and fortunately, her mother was able to help her get tied in with the right teachers. And I know it was her. I think it was her science teacher who really helped her focus her energies on where her strengths were and what she was good at, and helped her get into things with animals, and then
Is that right?
Yeah.
I understand that one of her issues, which is an issue for people with disabilities today, and all the more reason we need to be aware of it, is she struggled with a little social skills. Like she didn't exactly, how can we say this? I understand she may have had a friend or two, but she didn't exactly have like a people. Like a group, like how people, they have the jocks and the cheerleaders and well, I don't like saying this, I don't want to say geeks. They have but they have, everyone has like their peers. That is the word I was looking for, their peers. But unfortunately, and I understand this from experience myself, you can still have friends and still feel out of place. And I understand Temple Grandin dealt with a little bit of that herself. In her youth.
Yeah, when she was younger, I believe so. There's a movie about her life, and
that's how I learned about her. Actually,
I remember
and then
there's some
I
scenes
met her
with her struggling with understanding her peers. I think she had a roommate, which.
Yes, she did. I remember. I haven't even seen that movie in years. It's hard to imagine I still remember. I remember she had a roommate in college, I think. They listened to Star Trek on the radio. I had no idea. In those days, Star Trek was on the radio.
I don't know. But, I believe most people do struggle socially. But when I think people feel.
Could you give some examples
Well, for example,
on the subject, please?
Yeah,
about
I will.
what a social struggle for someone with
Yeah.
a disability like autism might be.
Well, I think understanding what another person might be thinking.
So empathy.
Well, not necessarily empathy, but understanding that somebody might have different thoughts and feelings than what you currently have in your own head.
Oh, I see. So reshaping perspective, or like
Yeah.
putting yourself in the shoes. They lack that ability.
Yes, and so that's called theory of mind, being
Oh.
able to understand somebody else's perspective,
I
or that,
never heard of that.
or
Fascinating.
even that somebody else has a different perspective, and that's the skill typically around 5 years of age that develops in kids. But for folks who are on the spectrum, it's a little more challenging to understand that somebody might have different thoughts and feelings than you.
Not exactly wired the same way, is
No.
it? And you say this is what is it called? Theory of
Theory
mind?
of mind.
Theory of mind?
Theory of mind.
Oh, theory of mind. I've never heard of that. That's very fascinating. 5 years of age, huh? Between you and me, I think my theory of mind got delayed a few years.
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody, not...
I'm partly kidding, but I'm partly
right,
serious.
Right. Yes. Well,
It took me a little while to understand other people wired differently as well.
Yeah, and so, and that can be challenging if, with theory of mind, if you don't have that understanding that somebody has different thoughts and feelings than you do.
Not to mention perspectives and experience.
Yes. So it might be hard to understand. So, for example, let's say I'm interested in talking about horses, and I start talking to you about horses, and I keep talking and talking and talking.
And I don't have the same passion or interest.
I don't pick up on your body language or
the rolling of the eyes.
Or your verbal cues of asking me other questions.
You don't get that.
You're trying to change the subject, so then maybe I just keep talking about horses.
Excellent example. Yeah. And I also bring that up because I had to take an interpersonal skills course. And what that is skills that you brought up, excellent examples, were taught to me, or maybe better introduced, by Susan Fisher and Lori Rue of Blue Valley High, one of the finest institutions, finest school districts in the country. And no, I'm not showing favoritism. You can look at a list of the schools in the country. It's literally in the top 100, probably like right up there, like above 50 or so. It's literally rated one of the best.
It's a good school.
Oh yes, a fine institution. Not just school district as well, according to the stats. Anyway, what they did was they helped me better understand character development and social skills, like you talked about, like understanding verbal cues, rolling of the eyes, body language, things like that.
Well, and their class was fantastic. I was very fortunate to spend time in that class when I was getting my doctorate degree. And
you were involved personally in the class, were you?
I got to come observe, work with some students that were in the class, but I loved how they had, half the class were students were identified with disabilities, and the other half were typical kids, and everybody was
half for others, huh?
Yeah.
I was not aware.
So, but everybody learned about how do you interact with your peers.
If I may, because I didn't know this, are you telling me that half the students enrolled in that class didn't have disability and half did?
Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't aware until I was a little older and I got the message. I guess I thought most of the people did have disabilities. See, because some of them were a little easier to tell.
Yeah. Well, there's a variety of students with disabilities in class. Some were more obvious than others.
Well, true. I mean, case in point.
But it was a nice, about
mix,
half and half mix, and I really liked how the teachers would introduce different topics, and then the class would talk about it. So, for example, what do you do? Let's see, for prom. I remember they talked about how do you pick up your date? Do you buy them flowers? What do you say? If you're going out for dinner, what do you do?
In other words, courtesy things.
Yeah, and just they talk through it. I remember
outside. Doing a practice date thing in my first year.
Going outside and practicing, helping your date get into the car. I mean, just
No,
all
I didn't
kinds-
do that, but
Okay.
I remember
But there was
people tell those
yeah,
things.
but all kinds of different topics. There was also I might be saying the wrong words, but it was like step outs where a group of kids would go out together on the weekends.
I remember that. I can't say I remember the phrase, but I remember
Something
we would
like that.
organize events.
Yeah.
They would make us have goals about doing events. I remember doing that with a friend of mine, Justin Pemberton, known him 19 years. We had the class together, 2 years. Oh, that was fun. And I remember our second year, we were getting better acquainted with some of the students we met through there, and they invited us to this movie that wasn't my thing, but I was willing to try it out. It was called, actually, we were first going to see a Star Wars thing was sold out. Then we saw another one, still not my thing, Eagle Eye. I'd never really seen a lot of action movies. This might have been the first real action movie I'd ever seen. And we go, and I just had a great time. I was just enjoying the company and the people.
But it was a good way to get out.
It was
and,
no,
you know?
absolutely. I'm saying it was the first time I was ever out of my
Yeah.
comfort zone. I enjoyed myself.
Yeah, and think about maybe for some students.
Plus, it probably helped that the company was a little more easygoing, flexible, and respectful.
That-
I haven't
that is
always
true.
had that. I haven't always had that luxury.
Yeah, so that was true because part of the class with having typical peers in there was to help them understand, like, how do I interact with students, my peers with disabilities?
Oh, I still don't know.
Yeah.
But let's just say I'm getting better at playing by ear.
But it was about being being inclusive and getting to know people who maybe you wouldn't normally talk to.
I had a similar situation with a group plan, and it wasn't even for disabilities. You bring up an excellent point on that.
So, and in that class, I mean, like, everybody learned how to communicate better and how to socialize better. And how to, I don't know, in general, just how to be a better person. And it's a really good class. And
It
something
was.
And they're still offering it.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It's I think it'll serve future generations well. Unfortunately, as good as it is, there are still a lot of issues that the class can't eliminate alone, aren't there? Like, for example, let's say someone kind of has physical tells, like someone with Tourette's or something, or any disability, Asperger's, autism, Tourette's, they have like a tic, or they have like, I don't know, a verbal or an impulse, a compulsion that they can't control. And they don't understand, and then the people question them, they don't understand, and well, you know how easily people shun or bully anyone they don't understand.
Right.
Or at least I'm sure you're not surprised.
No, I'm not surprised. And that's something, I think schools are trying to be better about being more open.
Open-minded?
Because it used to be, okay, I'm older than you, okay, by a few decades. When I went to school...
Well, that explains why you're the doctor and I'm the student.
Okay.
That would suggest a few things.
But
Like you were saying.
Yeah, but when I went to school, or when my parents went to school,
okay,
the students with disabilities weren't looked at as being able to achieve.
They weren't. I'll admit, I would think they were a little maybe discouraged, but I didn't think they were thought of obsolete.
Yeah. Well, you got to look at throughout history, things have definitely changed.
Yes, they have.
Prior to 1975, students who had disabilities didn't have the right to go to school.
That's right. In fact, I understand that, unfortunately, as you suggested, I remember seeing a video either my first or second year of social work. I understand that people with disabilities, even before Asperger's syndrome or autism was recognized, I'm afraid I'm sorry to say this. I understand that a lot of those people who didn't have, who couldn't exactly socialize well or communicate regularly, what I mean is on a daily basis, according to society standards, they were incarcerated. I understand that a majority of those people were incarcerated.
Throughout
And
history,
that means put into prison.
Prison or
mental institutions?
Yep, institutionalized, and that was something that has been done throughout history. People who are considered undesirable, you put them away.
Or unfortunately, and I hate to say this, not perfect.
Right. And it was a
Which
variety
is another
of
issue
people.
we'll be bringing up 4th of July on my birthday.
Okay.
I plan to talk about our history.
Great. I think more people need to know that. Something with my graduate classes and undergraduate classes, I talk about history because they need to know what has happened throughout time for people with a variety of different.
I was just going to say, so we're
disabilities.
clear, we're talking about the history of people with disabilities, yes?
Yeah.
Because that's what I thought. See, I thought Independence Day was the birth of the history of America. Is that right? So I figured, what better way to celebrate this channel, or what better story of this channel than to take Independence Day to celebrate the history of people with disabilities.
Yes.
You know, like how far we came in the war and things, and
Yeah, and because of war.
because we too dealt with prejudice and
Yes.
discrimination.
But because of World War II.
Too, unfortunately, yeah.
But because there was disabled veterans because of the war, we
Oh, I
started
didn't
getting
think of
disability
that.
rights.
I was too busy thinking of people being judged again socially, and how certain. Again, I want to save this for July, but let's just say certain people who believed in perfectionism, even more than myself, and that says something.
And that actually.
No,
I can
please, no. What were you going to say?
Those thoughts actually started in the United States. And
Perfectionism?
the eugenics movement, which what it was called, and
I don't believe I'm familiar with this. So long as the subject remains. What is eugenic?
I think you're trying to refer to. I'm guessing Hitler.
I didn't want to say the name and refer closer to the way closer to 4th of July, but yes, I was referring to, sadly, Adolf Hitler.
Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry.
But his beliefs he actually got from the United States. Now the United
that's a little irony. Yeah.
The United States, the eugenics movement, looking at how, and it was looked at initially from.
What is this eugenics movement you're mentioning?
It started in the 1915s, 1920s. And right now, off the top of my head, I cannot remember the doctor who started it. But
unless it's Dr. Seuss or Freud.
Neither of those. But they took the idea of breeding from animals. How can you breed a better human? You know how
unless it's Michael Fox or Erwin Schrödinger, not Jay Fox, Michael Fox. He was a vet, I think, or something.
No, but I can't remember his. I'll get
doctor.
you his
He was
name.
a professional doctor.
But they started looking at how can we breed better people, and it started off
Joseph Stalin. Was it Stalin?
No.
I remember I heard of a rumor he was trying to create a perfect soldier.
Maybe.
I heard this once. I learned about him doing something like this once in a history class back in my community college. They mentioned something on the Big Bang Theory, and I wouldn't be surprised if a little bit of that inspired Captain America.
You never know.
He tried to breed people with gorillas in order to create the perfect super soldier.